Thank you. All right, so normally we do, everybody has an opportunity to do a 10-minute like we do. Because when you go around the room real quick like that, 30 seconds, it's not really enough to teach us about what you do so we can be the best sales force for you. So everybody has every week the opportunity to do a 10-minute. Now, I wanted to spend this 10 minutes just talking about myself, but I was overruled. So I'm going to talk about B&I a little bit in the group. All right, so let's talk about what it means to be successful. Just by show of hands, who wants to be successful? Right, in your business or family, right? Pretty cheesy question. Of course we all do. But let's talk about a little bit more in detail on what it takes to be successful. This is the audience participation portion. So if you can tell me, what do you think qualities are that take to be successful?
Punctual. Integrity.
Give me a word that I make sure I can spell. Integrity. What else?
Pleasant work.
Hard work.
Quality.
Goals.
Goals. What else?
Knowledge.
Got to be a little bit smart, right? What else?
Develop skills.
Anything else?
Continue your education.
Anything else? Got space for one more thing.
I said follow
A lot
up
of-
on, on your,
Yeah, hard work, follow up.
same thing. Okay.
Not really, but
Communication. There you go.
and maybe just a little luck. Right place, right time.
How about referrals?
And referrals. Ooh, that's why we're all here, right? All right. All right, so let's go into a couple of these things. Let's talk about smart. How smart do you have to be successful? So there was a study done by Lewis Terman from Stanford University in 1921. And what he did was he got this large grant from the university to send researchers out into the world and try to find the smartest kids and follow them to see what happened to these future elite. So he sent these researchers out, and it was about 250,000 students from elementary to high school. And he had the teachers nominate the brightest and the best. And then he gave them a test, whittled it down again, gave them another test, whittled it down again, gave them a third test. It came down from 250,000 to about 1,470 students. These were the brightest and the best. The IQs ranged from about 140 to 200. Just so you know, average is about 100. Einstein is 150. Adam's like 70, but that's it. So these kids were the future elite, and Lewis Terman, they call these the kids the termites. This is a famous study. So he followed them throughout their whole lives, took their phone calls, helped them whenever they needed to make sure that these kids were the most successful they could be. What they found was, and they had doctors, they had attorneys, they had people high up in every parts of the corporate world. But what they found was if you divided it up, that if you took, and other psychologists did this, they did studies on the termites. And they did a massive amount of research and divided them up into three groups. The first group was the ones that were off the charts. Those were the doctors, the attorneys, right? And then that was about maybe 20% of them. And then 60% in the middle were just satisfactory, according to Lewis Terman. The bottom 20% were college dropouts, didn't finish college, unsatisfactory jobs, according to whatever Lewis Terman decided what it was. Among them, they were super successful people. But what they found when psychologists went back and studied all these kids, they found that really there wasn't a whole lot of difference. If you picked the same amount of kids from the same background and dispensed of IQ altogether, you'd have about the same successful people. In that whole group, there were no Nobel Prize winners. However, from the initial group, there were two that didn't make the cut because they didn't have the IQ. So what they found was IQ matters. There is a correlation to being smart and successful, but only to a certain point. they found that about, if your IQ was about 120, above that it didn't really matter. Other things came into play. Maybe what groups you were in, how well you networked. Things like that added to your success, and IQ really didn't matter. So just kind of like being a professional basketball player. If you're 5'6", you're probably not going to be in professional basketball. But if you're 6'1", it's probably better than being 6 foot, right? 6'2" is probably better than 6'1". 6'3" is probably better. At some point, height doesn't matter anymore in the professional basketball, right? After that, you just have to be tall enough. After that, after a certain height, maybe court sense or agility or quickness comes more into play. Just like being successful, you have to be smart, but you don't have to be the smartest, right? It doesn't. There's a point where it drops off. So that's smartness and success. Let's talk about right place, right time. And maybe that right place, right time is today. Has everybody heard of the 10,000 hours that it takes to be an elite, be an expert in your field? Malcolm Gladwell made it famous in his book, The Outliers, but he was referring to a study that was done in 1991 where a group of psychologists went to the Berlin University of violinists and talked to all the violinists and divided them up into 3 groups. The A group were the elite. Those are the ones that were going to go on, and you probably know their names if you're in that area. B, that group was satisfactory. They'll be okay. And then the C would probably go on to be like school teachers, things like in teach violin. So what they did is when they interviewed these 3 groups of people and tried to figure out what made them so good was practice. So they determined that everybody in the A group, they started out at age 5 about 3 to 4 hours a week. At age 8, 6 to 7 hours a week. Age 10, 10 hours a week, and so on. Up to age 20, they were practicing 30 hours a week. And this was practice for the sole purpose of getting better. What that added up to be about was 10,000 hours. Or 10 years, it equated to about. The middle of the group, they practiced about 8,000 hours. The C group, about 6,000. And they found that this was a link between everybody. They studied composers. They studied famous people all over. And it all seemed to match that when they became elite, when they became the expert in their field, it was about 10,000 hours. So true expertise comes at about that point. It's about 3 hours a day, 20 hours a week for 10 years. And they found that link from everybody from Mozart to Bobby Fischer in chess. Okay, so if we know 10,000 hours makes you an expert, let's back up. Everybody usually agrees that the dawn of the computer age started January 1975. That's when Popular Electronics, the Bible for computer nerds, had on the cover of their magazine the Altair 8800, the first personal computer. So whoever at that point when that came out, if you were into computers and you had 10,000 hours, you'd be able to run with it, right? All right, so let's back up 10 years from that point. There was a young person, lived in Seattle, Washington. Pretty smart kid. His parents sent him to private school, Lakeside. Lakeside was the only school in the world that had a link to a mainframe computer. Now, mind you, back then, mainframe computers were about the size of this room. And to be able to access them, you had to have a computer that was connected to a phone line. Like when they first came out, they could only do one thing at a time. You had to have lines of code, put them on a punch card, make an appointment with an operator, put it in, and then they would reply to what the computer said. And then a couple years later, they came out where the computer could do more than one thing at a time, so you didn't have to make an appointment. And then they came out where you could connect them to via a phone line and communicate it with it. That's when this student really exploded into the computer world because he could spend all day and he could spend all night. And later interviews from his parents said, we wondered why he was so tired in high school because he would sneak out every night from 3 to 6 and work on this computer or work on this link directly connected to the mainframe at University of Washington. Only place in the world at the time. This person went on, spent hours and hours, and it turned out to be about 10,000 hours when he dropped out of Harvard as in sophomore year and started a little-known company called Microsoft. It's Bill Gates. So when that computer came out on that Popular Electronics magazine, he had 10,000 hours in, and he was able to take it and run. Now, if you think about it, when that computer came out on that magazine, who were the people who could really run with this idea? If you were too young in high school, you probably couldn't really much do with this, right? It's a personal computer, what can we do? If you're too old, you're probably already working at IBM on mainframes. You thought personal computers was probably just a fad. Or you have a family, kids, a pension, who's gonna mess with this, right? So you gotta be at that perfect age, the right time, the right place. And it turns out that if you were born about 1953, 1954, 1955, you were the perfect age to really run with this idea. And if you had 10,000 hours in, boom, you were starting companies like Microsoft, Apple, Sun Microsystems. Let's go over a few dates. Bill Gates, born in 1955. Paul Allen, who started Microsoft with him, born in 1953. Steve Ballmer ran Microsoft for years, 1956. Steve Jobs, 1955. Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, 1955. Bill Joy started Sun Microsystems. It's considered the Edison of the internet. You can still go into code today on the internet and see code that he wrote 35 years ago. Born 1954. Scott McNealy, 1954 at Sun Microsystems. Merrill Castle, 1955. Andy Bechtolsheim, 1955. I can go on and on. You can see that these people who were super successful in their field were there at the right place, right time. And my point is, maybe today, maybe right now is the right time, the right place for you and your business. Okay, let's go on to community. All right, so there's this little town, Rossetto, about 100 miles south of Rome. All the workers there worked their butts off in the marble quarry down the road. They had to walk all the way down the road, work, and then climb all the way up the hill back to their town. Very, very hard work. So 11 men, 10 men and one boy actually, came to America in 1882. They decided to come here and settled in Bangor, Pennsylvania. Soon, more people heard about this special place. A stream became a flood. 1,200 people, 1,300 people, 1,400 people in this little town in Bangor, Spain. After a while, a doctor, Stuart Wolf, from the area, who saw a lot of the people in this area of, we'll call it Little Rossetto, was commenting to another doctor how nobody from this town had heart problems. Nobody under 55 had any heart attacks whatsoever, and over 65, it was about half of what the rest of the United States saw when it came to heart conditions. So him and another doctor wanted to find out why. What special thing did this little town have? So they spent tons of research and went through everything. How they lived, what they ate, what they did, where they came from. So even when they looked at the diet was nothing special. Back in Italy, they had this really special high-fat cheese that they would only eat on Christmas and holidays. Here, they were eating it every day. There were people who smoked. You had your obese people just like anywhere else. One doctor said that their diet, 40% of their diet was from fat. So it wasn't diet. So they thought, okay, maybe these group of people came from a special stock in Italy that their genes were immune from whatever life threw your way, right? So they followed family members that lived in other places of Bangor, other places of the United States, and they had the same issues that everybody else had. They weren't any healthier. They didn't have the special health attributes that these people did in Bangor, Spain. So what was it? The only thing that they could come down to was community. They had people support everybody. They had a like-minded group of people that would help them in business. The successful would help the unsuccessful. They had a church right in the middle that everybody went to. 3 generations of people lived in the same house. 22 civic organizations for such a small little town. Everybody helped each other. And that's what it's all about, community. Biologists talk about the redwood tree. What makes the biggest redwood tree in the forest? They always say, well, it comes from the richest acorn. Well, we all know, and we can see by this list of things that we think it needs to be successful, it's much more than just that. The biggest redwood tree, yeah, it probably has the richest acorn, but it probably is growing in the richest soil. It's probably surrounded by trees that protect it from storms, but still allow it to get the most sunlight. Maybe it was lucky enough to not get chewed on as a sapling from a little bunny. Or not chopped down when it was big and hardy. It takes a lot for things to be successful, for people to be successful. There's an old African proverb that says it takes a village. Would the BNI members from this chapter raise your hands? So visitors and guests, this is your village. We're here to help you. We're here to support you. As you can see, the theme from everything, what it takes to be successful, community, support from other people doing what you're doing to help you get through it. Thanks for your time.